Vasily Podkolzin speaks out with the truth behind the Andrei Kuzmenko trade, how he feels the Canucks have delayed his development, and prays for one of his coaches in the organization. We'll be breaking down all of that in this episode of Canucks Digest, but first make sure to hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon so you don't miss any and all updates surrounding the Canucks this offseason. And with that, let's hop into the first topic of the day, which is Podkolzin reveals the truth on Kuzmenko trade. And we see here in one of the sound bites from a major interview that he did on Match TV in his home country of Russia, where he had many sound bites. So we're breaking down all of these. First of which talking about Kuzmenko, where he said, these are the demands of the new coach, Rick Tocchet. Kuzia didn't quite fit into the new style of play, but he was traded to Calgary, giving him what he needed. He got playing time and gained trust. And in Vancouver, the focus is now on fast and powerful hockey. Everything is from defense with minimum mistakes, and in some places you need to play simpler. You just need to fulfill these demands, and Kuzia didn't find that point of contact that Tocchet demanded. And when you look at Kuzmenko's stats, he had that breakout season when he did make that jump to the NHL in 2022-2023, where he had 74 points in 81 games, 39 goals, 35 assists, plus 9 rating. He was making good things happen. He was very productive, but you did see that productivity slip into the next season, I should say last season, where in he had 21 points in 43 games. Not exactly what they were looking for, but it was enough to have enough trade stock to trade him to Calgary, where they were able to get Elias Lindholm and eventually Nikita Zadorov, who were two major pieces that Vancouver needed going into last postseason, and they definitely would not have been where they were without him. And it is understandable for him to be missing his countrymen, as well as fans missing those days where Kuzmenko was in those glory days where he was doing a lot of production. Fans were loving him, but unfortunately that Kuzmenko is gone, and fans will have to move on without him, especially Podkolzin in particular, if he wants to make that jump to the Vancouver Canucks roster. I'm not exactly sure this quote did him many favors, where he is kind of saying like how much he misses a player who isn't quite there anymore. But again, it's understandable when you have a team full of Swedes that are playing with each other. You would want to have a Russian have a player play with him. But again, he is going to be spending most of his time in Abbotsford, it would seem, when especially you look at his stats. He has had an up and down relationship with the Canucks, spending time with the Canucks in both Abbotsford and Vancouver. So it is kind of hard to see where he's going to land with this Vancouver Canucks roster, as well as with all the front-loaded talent like we've said in their forwards. But that does bring us into the second topic of the day, which is him criticizing the Canucks in a sense, kind of, if you would say. He says, you see, I came to Vancouver at a time when it was being rebuilt. 3 coaches changed, many factors played a role, and somewhere maybe I didn't show myself very well, but I know that I can play good hockey, and I will play it. For this, I need a little more trust, a little more playing time, but I signed a new contract with the Canucks until 2026, the best I could get in this situation. Now I have one desire: to prepare well, return to Vancouver, and play good hockey. And it is nice to see he has that mentality going into this season where, like we said, he has an up and down relationship with the Canucks as far as getting on there and getting opportunities. You see there where he had 79 games played for Vancouver in 2021 to 2022, and it has dipped considerably since then, going down to 39 and then to 19 games. He has been getting decent playing time in Abbotsford, where he's been somewhat more productive, but in those NHL starts, he hasn't really shown the productivity that they would want. And with all the pieces that they've gone out and gotten to make sure that they have the depth for this team, Tocchet has made sure that depth is the identity of this team going forward, where when it comes down to the playoffs and it is a war of attrition, you do inevitably have those injuries in the postseason. You don't want to have to rely on those AHL guys to have to make sure that they're ready. It is nice if they are ready, but you don't want to have to rely on them to make those jumps into the postseason situations, where we saw this year when they had Niels Almond, Linus Karlsson. Those guys did just fine, but they did get exploited somewhat by teams that were healthier and did have the competitive edge in that sense. So with that said, I don't know if Podkolzin is going to make his jump to the starting lineup for Vancouver this season. I know fans wanted to see that last season, as well as Lecker-Mackey and Hoglander getting in there a bit more. But I don't think this is the season where that is going to happen. I think Vancouver just has too much front-loaded talent on the forwards where they're going to make too many things happen, and I don't think there's going to be as much room for a guy like Podkolzin, who, like we've seen, he has been decent in those times, but I think he just needs a bit more time to get going before he is ready to make that jump into the Vancouver Canucks roster as a mainstay. However, it wasn't all bad for Podkolzin. He did have some praise for one of his coaches, and that was Sergei Gonchar, where he came out and said it used to be, but it wasn't in the playoffs as far as the help and support he was getting from him. Gonchar works with the defenders and, of course, with Russian players. However, I'm the only one left now. He did express that at another point in the interview, especially when talking about Evgeny Kuznetsov coming back to the KHL. Obviously, Sergei communicates with me closer. We watch videos somewhere together on how to prove my game, and that is also reassuring to see where players, coaches is what this organization wants. Not just with Rick Tocchet, which that seems to be his coaching identity on top of depth, is just making sure that he is the best coach for these players, making sure that they have what they need, making sure that he is the mentor that they need, and that has extended throughout the entire organization. Patrik Allvin and Jim Rutherford have done a great job of assembling the right pieces around these players to mold not only the young guys, but also the vets into the players that they want them to be. We've seen it from Rick Tocchet down to Manny Malhotra, down to Sergei Gonchar, especially with the Sedins and their elevated role that they are going to be playing this season. So it is going to be nice and reassuring to see that these players are taking a shine to these player coaches where they have playing experience. They are a bit easier to have as a mentor rather than a coach who has not played in the league, who hasn't been there. He hasn't done that. He hasn't bought the t-shirt, whereas these guys have, and they've done it with the Vancouver Canucks as well. So they have that ingrained team mentality where they want to see the Canucks win more than anything. It's not like they're just coming in from another team or that they played for another team, might have those old allegiances where they want to see their team succeed as well as that other team. No, these guys are all in on the Canucks just like we are. So we'd love to hear what you guys think on the Canucks and how on these Podkolzin comments. Do you think that we would have been better off having Kuzmenko instead of Lindholm going into last season for the rest of it? Do you think that Podkolzin will make that jump to the Vancouver Canucks starting roster, whether by the middle of next season, by the end of next season, or just as an injury filler? We'd love to hear what you guys say. And speaking of which, let's get into everyone's favorite topic, which is comment of the day. And we see here in a comment from GoodEye6373 that once Kuzmenko was gone, the power play did not play as effectively. It can only help having the Sedins coach a power play, just as long as they don't teach defense and rough stuff. That was their Achilles heel. Both the Sedins, in retrospect, were two of the top power play guys for years, but they had a bond where they knew where the other one was, and two of the best passers in franchise history. I think we get closer to where we want to go. Not saying we win the cup, but we could, and I couldn't agree more. Good eye. You did have a good eye with that comment where you pointed out a lot of great things where the power play did dip when Kuzmenko left. Lindholm was a decent power play filler. However, he wasn't perfect like Kuzmenko was doing seemingly as well on the power play. So having him there on the power play would have been nice, but the Sedins are going to work to make sure that those kinks are refined, those tools are sharpened so that they make sure the power play is consistent throughout the entire season, especially if they are working with players where they're going to make sure that those players have the bond that the Sedins had. They're all-time greats for the franchise and for NHL history. They are certified Hall of Famers, so they are going to make sure that they bring that mentality to this new Vancouver Canucks team. It's going to be amazing to see what this identity of this team is going forward. We can't wait for next season. I just wish it would already start. Would love to hear how you guys are feeling heading into next season. Let us know down in the comments down below. But that's going to do it for this episode of Canucks Digest. I've been your host, Griffin. Take care.